We are pleased that many of the key elements needed to reach that consensus on the GERD are captured in the 2015 Declaration of Principles. In particular, the principles not to cause significant harm and of equitable and reasonable utilisation. Since the Declaration of Principles, the three parties have continued talks to reach a more detailed trilateral agreement on the filling and operation of the dam. We would like to thank the African Union, Chairperson Tshisekedi and former Chairperson Ramaphosa for their support to this process. Mr. President, we recognise that reaching agreement requires compromise by all parties. The United Kingdom notes Egypt and Sudan's disappointment that a resolution has yet to be reached, as well as the stated commitment of all three countries to the AU-led talks. The United Kingdom is confident that working together and with the ongoing support of the African Union and the wider international community, Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan have the strength and resolve to reach agreement to the benefit of all. We call on all three sides to refrain from actions that undermine negotiations. We encourage them to engage constructively and urgently in a spirit of compromise to conclude negotiations and reach a mutually acceptable agreement. Mr. President, in concluding, let me once again reaffirm the United Kingdom's strong support for the AU-led process and the governments of Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan in their endeavours to reach an equitable, mutually acceptable agreement. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Kenya.
Thank you, Mr. President, for holding this meeting, and thank you to the representative of the Democratic Republic of Congo for carrying the message of your Minister of Foreign Affairs on behalf of the chairperson of the African Union, who is an actively seized mediator on the matter of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. I recognize the legitimate concerns that have prompted the presence here in the Security Council of Her Excellency Mariam Mahdi, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Sudan, and His Excellency Sameh Shukri, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt, and His Excellency the Minister of Water, Irrigation and Energy, Dr. Seleshi Bekele of Ethiopia. Thank you to the Director General of UNEP and the Special Envoy for the Secretary General for the Horn of Africa, Bafeo Nanga, for their briefings. The human settling of the Nile Basin throughout history has been a source of hope and connection. It is unfortunate that today we are discussing it here in a Security Council whose mandate is to deal with dangers to international peace and security. It is home to more than 257 million people. It covers a territory of a dozen African countries whose population is close to 500 million. The majority have woken up to a busy day and may not be aware of this meeting in New York City, but every single one of them will be impacted by the statements and decisions made here today. This meeting is directly about the GERD and the three countries represented here, but the story that arises from it also concerns the other countries joined by the ambition that gave rise to the Nile Basin Initiative in 1998. The objectives of this riparian intergovernmental partnership are to develop the Nile Basin water resources in a sustainable and equitable way to ensure prosperity, security, and peace for all its peoples. It seeks to pursue the same aims pursued in the GERD within a framework agreement. Its millions only desire to throw off the shackles of poverty and its associated ills of disease and war. They do not consider such a desire to be a threat to international peace and security because the legal principles underlying the initiative are protective of all its members. Today, the Security Council is considering the legitimate concerns of two riparian states in Egypt and Sudan arising from the legitimate utilization of the Nile waters by another riparian state in Ethiopia. Kenya stands with the three states, recognizing their equality and that all their people equally deserve development and prosperity. We pay tribute to His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, who as chair of the African Union, initiated the negotiations between the three countries. We commend the governments of Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan for their faith and confidence in the capacity of African Union mechanisms to assist them to mediate an agreement. We respectfully recognize and support the mandate of mediation presently held by His Excellency President Felix Tshisekedi, the current chairperson of the African Union. We call on all parties supporting this process to commit their expertise to ensure that it is adequately resourced. We recommend to the attention of the Council that the chairperson is actively seized of this matter as reflected in the remarks by the Special Envoy and by the representative of the Foreign Minister of the DRC. This was reflected in the communique of the meeting of the AU Bureau of Assembly of the AU Heads of State and Government held on the 24th of June this year. It reports that the AU chairperson traveled to Cairo, Khartoum, and Addis Ababa during the week of May 9th, where he had encouraging bilateral talks with the heads of state and government. Mr. President, Kenya recognizes the critical importance of the principle of subsidiarity in this matter and recommends it to the Security Council. We call on all the parties to recommit to negotiating in good faith within the AU-led process in a spirit fired by our shared dream of building a more united and prosperous Africa by 2063. We urge them to avoid inflammatory utterances because making them is what may lead to tension as opposed to the underlying issue of the Nile River and its uses. Kenya has every confidence that our Egyptian, Ethiopian, and Sudanese brothers and sisters will make the principle of African solutions for African challenges a reality. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Kenya for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Norway.
Thank you, President. I thank the briefers for their important insight. We also welcome the ministers and representatives of Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan, and DRC to today's meeting. The three parties, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan, have legitimate interest in the Nile River and its water resources. A sustainable solution to the issue of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam can only be found by the parties themselves. Much has already been agreed through the Declaration of Principles, which is a good framework to seek equitable and reasonable use of the Blue Nile. What remains now is for the parties to reach consensus on modalities for future cooperation based on these principles and on transparency and trust. This requires constructive engagement, the political will, and courage to find compromise. We call on the three parties to refrain from any action that could undermine negotiations and to make full use of the good offices of the African Union, especially through its facilitator role. President, Norway encouraged Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan to invest politically in an agreement on the good which all parties can benefit from. We are confident that the return on this investment will be development and prosperity for the people of all three states and beyond. Let good and the Nile be a source of opportunities, not conflict. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Norway for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, St. Vincent and the Grenadines expresses its appreciation to the representative of the Democratic Republic of the Congo on behalf of the Chair of the African Union, the Special Envoy of the Secretary General for the Horn of Africa, and the Director General of UNEP for their comprehensive briefings on this very important, yet complex and sensitive topic. We also welcome the distinguished foreign ministers of Egypt and Sudan, and the distinguished Minister of Water of Ethiopia in today's meeting, and reaffirm our unwavering solidarity to our sister nations. St. Vincent and the Grenadines acknowledges the paramount importance of the River Nile and its intrinsic value as a transboundary water resource to each of the parties, and by extension all riparian states, to enhance the quality of life of their peoples. This was underscored during our meeting last year, and is worth repeating today. Indeed, the Nile is indispensable to the sustainable and socio-economic development of each of the parties, and we note their disagreements and credible concerns pertaining to its usage. We encourage them to assuage their entrenched positions and continue with the trilateral negotiations in good faith in order to reach an amicable, equitable, and reasonable agreement. Such agreements between riparian states become even more critical as climate change increases both flooding and drought in the river, as highlighted earlier by the UNEP Executive Director, Ms. Inga Anderson. The good offices of the African Union remains pivotal to facilitate constructive dialogue and meaningful negotiations. In this context, we are appreciative of and pleased that the African Union is fully seized of the issue and commend the current mediation efforts of President Tshisekedi Chilombo, as well as those of his predecessor, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, President of South Africa. It is our principled position that the African Union is best suited to facilitate the pacific settlements of disputes on the motherland, and we further underscore the importance of respecting the principle of subsidiarity as well as Chapter 8 of the UN Charter. More pertinently, the existing disagreement is among family members. To this end, we are fully confident that Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan will resolve their difficulties, as all families do, with wisdom and harmony. In closing, we underscore that the Nile remains a beacon of hope and prosperity and a sanctuary for millions of people. Our sister nations have a common and shared history that is linked by the Nile and whose futures will be interwoven by it. Accordingly, it is in their collective interests to find a palatable solution to ensure that they can provide a dignified future for their peoples. Despite the current setbacks, St. Vincent and the Grenadines remains very optimistic that the parties will reach a lasting agreement, especially since they have already agreed on approximately 90% of the issues. We hope that the parties recommit to negotiations in good faith under the auspices of the African Union. We believe that such would only redound to the greater benefit of the three parties, to ensure the continuation of their peaceful and harmonious coexistence. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of St. Vincent and the Grenadines for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Благодарю вас.
Thank you, Mr. President. We welcome the participation of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt, Sameh Shoukry, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sudan, Mariam Al-Mahdi, and Minister for Water Resources, Irrigation and Energy of Ethiopia, Selesha Bikele, in today's meeting. We thank Undersecretary General and Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Program, Inger Anderson, for her briefing, as well as Special Envoy of the Secretary General for the African Horn, Parfait Onyango, and the Chargé d'Affaires of the DRC, Paul and Paul. The Russian Federation is closely following developments in the situation with the Great Renaissance Dam being built by Ethiopia on the Blue Nile River. We are fully cognizant of the political and socioeconomic significance of this hydropower project, the largest on the African continent, for the millions of people living in Ethiopia, a country that is experiencing major electricity shortage. At the same time, we note the legitimate concerns expressed by Egypt and Sudan regarding the possible negative impacts that the functioning of this dam could have in the absence of an agreement on the inhabitants of these countries during dry years. We believe there's no alternative to settling this water dispute through political and diplomatic means via negotiations with the participation of the three countries. We are convinced that the search for solution must be carried out in accordance with the spirit and the letter of the Khartoum Declaration of 2015, taking into account the progress already achieved trilaterally in defining the modalities of the functioning of this Ethiopian hydroelectric complex. Mutual understanding and trust are required in this. Fanning the flames of the situation and statements about the possibility of using force should be avoided and should be prevented. We'll be frank, we are concerned about the escalation of confrontational rhetoric, which is not conducive to finding compromise-based solutions. We're convinced that disagreements on socioeconomic development should not lead to threats to peace and security. We believe that gradually reaching agreements on certain aspects of filling the reservoir and the further operation of the power station could lead to a de-escalation between the parties and help to gradually reach a comprehensive, mutually acceptable agreement. The best option would be to negotiate such a document with all the countries of the Nile Basin, which should participate in determining the modalities for the use of water resources on an equal footing. We appreciate the significant involvement of the African Union in resolving the dispute over the dam, including the work of its Committee of Technical and Legal Experts. We believe that the capacity of this authoritative regional organization to resolve the current water crisis has not yet been exhausted. We call on the Congolese chairmanship of the African Union to intensify efforts in this direction. An increase in the number of mediators or observers in the negotiations, in our opinion, will not bring added value. However, their involvement is possible with the consent of all parties. Mr. President, in conclusion, we would also like to make a concrete proposal to all interested parties. Since they're all here in New York, why not, with the mediation of the AU chairs, hold a round of talks on site regarding the disagreements around the dam? We believe that this would be the best contribution that the Council could make to find a solution to the situation in the spirit of the principle we all share, namely African solutions for African problems. We would like to underscore the Russian Federation's readiness to assist in resolving this complex problem. Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan are close friends of our country, and we sincerely hope that they will soon be able to resolve outstanding differences, agree on modalities for further filling the dam's reservoir, and overall achieve compromise solutions for its functioning. We affirm Russia's readiness to provide satellite monitoring of the filling of the reservoir in the event of a request from all participants in the trilateral negotiations. Thank you.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me start by thanking the briefers, Special Envoy Anungo Anyanga, Executive Director Anderson, and the DRC representative on behalf of Chairman Tshisekedi for the information that you shared with us today. I would also like to welcome the participation of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs from Egypt and Sudan and the Minister of Water from Ethiopia. Mr. President, the Horn of Africa is at an inflection point. Decisions in the weeks and months ahead will have significant long-term implications for the people of the region. The United States is committed to addressing the interlinked regional crises and to supporting a prosperous and stable Horn of Africa. So we stand ready to support collaborative and constructive efforts by Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan to resolve the issues over the GERD. We understand that the Nile waters and how these waters are used are important to all three of these countries, and we believe this is an issue that can be reconciled. A balanced and equitable solution to the filling and operation of the GERD can be reached with political commitment from all parties. Egypt and Sudan's concerns over water security and the safety and operation of the dam can be reconciled with Ethiopia's development needs. This begins with the resumption of productive, substantive negotiations. Those negotiations should be held under the leadership of the African Union and should recommence with urgency. This process should use the 2015 Declaration of Principles signed by the parties and the July 2020 statement by the AU Bureau as foundational references. We believe that the African Union is the most appropriate venue to address this dispute, and the United States is committed to providing political and technical support to facilitate a successful outcome. We urge the African Union and the parties to use the expertise and support of the three official observers, South Africa, the European Union, and the United States, as well as the United Nations and other partners to help achieve a positive outcome. We also urge representatives of Sudan, Ethiopia, and Egypt to continue to discuss with our government the full range of possible means to de-escalate tensions and to demonstrate flexibility in your approach to resolving this matter peacefully. We call on all parties to refrain from making any statements or taking any actions that might jeopardize the negotiation process and to commit themselves to a negotiated solution that is acceptable to everyone. Reaching a solution on the GERD would pave the way for additional cooperation on water resources, regional development, and economic integration. We reaffirm our commitment to work with Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan, as well as our allies and partners, to ensure that the African Union-led negotiations resume with urgency and move toward productive, substantive, and constructive ends. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Estonia.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I would also like to thank the briefers for their insightful briefings. The heightened tensions surrounding the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam are very concerning. Estonia has closely followed the developments. We have also carefully studied the letters that the concerned parties have submitted to the Council. It is obvious that there is no easy solution to this question. Therefore, it is twice as important that all three parties involved are willing to make the necessary concessions which would allow them to arrive at a fair and equitable solution. I believe this is achievable if all involved will negotiate in good faith. We acknowledge the role that the African Union has played in trying to help to find a solution. However, we regret that so far no agreement has been found on the outstanding issues, despite more than a year passing since the Council has last discussed this matter. We hope that with the facilitation of the African Union, the parties continue to work to come to an agreement in a timely manner. African Union, as the regional organization, should remain the main forum for this. Estonia also supports the continuation of the work of observers in this process. It is crucial to find a peaceful solution at the earliest opportunity before the tensions escalate. We are urging all parties to refrain from taking any unilateral actions which might escalate the situation. The best chance of finding a solution remains through negotiations and not through escalation. The time to come to an agreement is now. There is no more time for any further delays. Estonia fully supports finding a peaceful solution to this dispute. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the representative of Estonia for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Ireland.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, and I want to thank our briefers for their insights. I also want to recognise the presence of our distinguished guests today, ministers of Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan, and the representative of the Democratic Republic of Congo on behalf of the Chair of the African Union. Mr. President, it's our shared conviction that only a negotiated settlement can offer a solution to this critical issue. A negotiated agreement stands to benefit millions of people living in the Blue Nile Basin. We, Ireland, recognises how fundamental this issue is for all parties who see the Nile as a vital natural resource, critical for the livelihoods and development of the people across Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan. A lasting agreement on how the dam is managed is absolutely critical for the long-term stability and development of the entire region. Clearly, cooperation between the Blue Nile states has never been more important. Transboundary water cooperation is, of course, a key element in the implementation of the SDGs. Furthermore, Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan are experiencing firsthand the impacts of climate change, population growth and rapid urbanisation, which will only increase water management challenges. Sustained cooperation over water resources can only strengthen and support mutually beneficial relationships among neighbours. We believe the parties are right to be looking ahead for their own people's futures, but they need to do this in relative harmony and together. Mr. President, we recognise the African Union's efforts in leading negotiations on the GERD. We're encouraged by the leadership of the African Union and the chair of the DRC working to facilitate negotiations to find an equitable and peaceful solution, one that is acceptable to all parties. We believe that the African Union-led negotiations remain the best forum for finding a comprehensive agreement on the GERD. We encourage the African Union to continue to draw on the necessary technical expertise and political support to carry out this highly complex facilitation role. Ireland fully supports the efforts of the African Union and the observers to the process to bring the parties together to find a negotiated solution, and we encourage swift resumption of the talks. Mr. President, we urge the parties to avoid any actions which might call into question or damage the prospects of an accord. We encourage the parties to redouble their efforts to explore confidence-building measures, to decrease tensions and to build trust. As envisaged in the Declaration of Principles, this could include establishing reciprocal information sharing arrangement with the support of observers to facilitate mutual sharing of data. Predictability and transparency, we know, are critical to achieving a settlement. Mr. President, after a decade of negotiations, we believe that an agreement on the filling of the GERD should be within the reach of Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan. In the 2015 Declaration of Principles on the GERD, the three countries committed to cooperation, equitable and reasonable utilisation, security and the peaceful settlement of disputes. We hope that the remaining differences can be overcome with the necessary political will and a spirit of compromise that will benefit all the people of the region. Once again, we urge the parties to return to the negotiation table. We also understand that to achieve that, Political support is required. We see our meeting here today as part of the international community's response to this. We will continue to support a negotiated resolution on this matter. We fully support the European Union's role as an observer to the AU-led process, and we as Ireland stand ready to assist as needed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Merci.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of Ireland for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of India.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me begin by thanking Special Envoy of Secretary General for the Horn of Africa, Mr. Onanga Anyanga, and Ms. Inger Anderson, Executive Director of UNEP, for their briefings. I welcome the presence of the Honorable Foreign Ministers of Egypt and Sudan, and the Water, Irrigation and Energy Minister of Ethiopia, and the Chargé d'Affaires of the Democratic Republic of Congo in today's meeting. India is closely following the developments on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. The river basin of Nile encompasses 11 countries in Africa, which also includes Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. Therefore, there is no doubt that this is a complex transboundary water dispute involving many countries in the region, as well as several legal and technical issues. We recognize that the parties have already undertaken several initiatives to address issues arising out of construction and filling of GERD in Ethiopia. These include the establishment of an international panel of experts in 2012 to examine the dam's design and construction plans, a follow-up tripartite national committee in 2014, and the 2015 Declaration of Principles on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. We believe that these initiatives, particularly the 2015 Agreement on Declaration of Principles, provide a good basis to continue negotiations aimed at reaching an amicable solution that protects the interest of all three countries. It goes without saying that the Nile water usage should benefit people of all countries, respecting the rights of both upper and lower riparian states. The chair of the African Union, South Africa in 2020, and the Democratic Republic of Congo in 2021 commendable effort